With a citation. Mr. Chairman, sir, Igwe Awogidi, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor B.C. Ozumba, permit me to stand on protocol already well established. The Founders Day lecturer, sir, please, I crave your indulgence to be upstanding. It's only once in a lifetime that I get the opportunity to order the bishop around. It is a divine gift to be born a child. The gift of life is the most precious of the gifts from God. The recipient of the gift of life is, in turn, saddled with the responsibility of becoming a gift to life. It is this responsibility that propels man to grovel, to gain, and to grow. Otherwise, it becomes as sinful as it is sacrilegious to come into life a child, live out life a child, and die a child. That one has lived 61 years on earth does not mean that the one has had 61 years of experience in life. The varied experiences of the masquerade of today's festival bears out the veracity of the foregoing. Godfrey Igwebike Onah Okonoke dike kana bogu n'anya. Isi na isi rabu n'ọnụ nke bụ eziokwu bụ na mmadụ na-aka ibie. Nya mere na Igbo na-aza ọka dị Igbo maka na ọkịka dịbara na gboo. Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Nsukka, Nigeria, a priest, a pastor, a professor, Godfrey, or rather, Father Bishop Gode, to family members and to most of the common folk, or pastor to school and classmates, was born on 18 August 1956 into the devout but humble Catholic family of late Onyishi Gabriel and Mrs. Susanna Onah of Imilikani in the Udenu local government area of Enugu State, Nigeria. He is the second of 8 siblings, 5 males and 3 females. His late dad was a retired teacher and community leader whose revered status as the oldest man in the entire Imilike community was evident in his honorific of Enyi Naogene, which translates roughly to the elephant of Imilike. Mama Susanna is a housemaking mom, an inspiring and energetic women's leader. Our lecturer today had humble beginnings. He vividly recalls the experience of his early years of education in the elementary school through the 1960s, when he took some of his classes sitting blissfully with his peers under a mango tree or a cashew tree, or sometimes an odara tree. Unperturbed and little hampered by such hardships, He coursed through primary school with relative ease, graduating with distinction in the first school certificate examinations in 1970. Beginning from the local authority school, Imilikani, now community primary school, where he started, only to be interrupted by the Nigerian Civil War between 1967 and 1970. He went to St. Paul School, Mbanato, now Udunedem Community Primary School, where he finished up and took his final examinations. In hearkening to the promptings of the Holy Spirit for our vocation to the priesthood, he enrolled at St. John Cross Seminary School on 14th of January 1971, fresh from elementary school. He would go on to complete his junior seminary formation in 1975, obtaining brilliant grades in the West African General Certificate of Education examinations, which earned him a one-year apostolate of pupil teaching in his alma mater. He taught courses on the history of West Africa and biology, while also coordinating the seminarians' participations in liturgical exercises and co-managing the school's soccer team. He would later qualify as Grade 2 referee with the Nigerian Referees Association. I'm sure you didn't know this part. He studied philosophy at the philosophy campus of Bigard Memorial Seminary, Ikote Ekpene, now St. Joseph's Major Seminary, from 1976 to 1980, and theology at the Bigard Memorial Seminary, Enugu, both in southeastern Nigeria. He obtained the bachelor's degree in both disciplines, and in both instances graduated in first-class honors, summa cum laude. He served as editor-in-charge of The Fountain magazine, 1978-79, and The Touch magazine, 1982-1983, the signature students' publication of both major seminaries, respectively. Geoffrey was ordained to the priesthood on 28th of July, 1984, by the late Bishop Michael U. Eneja at the Holy Ghost Cathedral in Enugu, Nigeria. You didn't clap to this. Upon the creation of the Diocese of Nsukka out of Enugu in November 1990, he was incardinated into the new diocese. In 1988, Bishop Godfrey enrolled at the Pontifical Urbaniana University, Rome, for postgraduate studies in philosophy. Majoring in philosophical anthropology, he explored the relationship between meaning and healing in Viktor Frankl's logotherapy for his licentiate, which he completed yet again in summa cum laude in 1992. He would explore the complex nature of the human spirit through his doctoral thesis titled Self-Transcendence and Human History in Wolfart-Pannenberg in 1992. In 1992, he was awarded a PhD in philosophy. Incredibly, yet again, in the summa cum laude grade. The nature and the importance of the individual human being were at the core of both investigations. In the course of a 33-year stewardship in the Lord's vineyard in the two continents of Africa and Europe, the Most Reverend Professor Onah, fluent in several languages, including Igbo, English, French, Italian, and German, has performed diverse pastoral duties in rural and urban parishes, minor and major seminaries, universities and chaplaincies, of institutions and of lay apostolate organizations. He has also served on several church panels. The highlights of his assignment as a priest include second vice rector and teacher, St. John Cross Seminary in Nsukka, Nigeria, 1984 to 1985. Assistant parish priest, St. Mary's Catholic Mission, Nimbo, Nigeria, 1985 to 1987. Enugu Diocesan Chaplain, Catholic Young Men Organization, Nigeria, 1985 to 1987. Philosophy teacher and administrator, Dean, Seat of Wisdom Seminary, Owerri, Nigeria, 1987 to 1988. Pastoral collaborator, St. Pius X Parish, Rome, Italy, 1993 to 1994. Acting parish priest and parish administrator, St. Anthony of Padua, S. Paloma, Rome, Italy, 1994 to 1997. Member, missionary team, Center for Missionary Apostolate, Diocese of Habano, Rome, Italy, 1997 to 2000. Chaplain, Association of Catholic Professionals, MEIC, Diocese of Albano, Rome, Italy, 2000 and 2005. Director, Institute for Research on Non-Belief and Cultures, Pontifical Urbaniana University, Rome, Italy, 2001 to 2007. Member, Board of Governors, Nostar Aetate Foundation, Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, Vatican City, 2002 to 2013. Prefect of Studies, Pontifical Urban College, Rome, Italy, the prestigious 386-year-old seminary from which the Urbaniana University started, and it served between 2003 to 2009. Vice Rector, Pontifical Urbaniana University, Rome, 2008 to 2013, making it 2 terms. Consultor, General Secretariat of the Synod of Bishops, Vatican City, 2009 to 2013. Father Bishop Godi was honored with the rank of a chaplain of His Holiness, Monsignor, on 9 May 2012 by Pope Benedict XVI. He has participated in 4 assemblies of the Synod of Bishops as an expert, that is Peritus. The Synod is an assembly of Catholic bishops invited from all over the world to reflect with the Pope and to advise him, the Pope, on important issues relating to his teaching and governance of the Universal Church. The experts, through their scholarly researches and reflections, collaborate with the bishops in this delicate aspect of the Church's work of evangelization. Of note, our bishop was one of the first 7 consultors drawn from among the experts ever to be appointed to the General Secretariat of the Synod of Bishops on 22nd December 2009 by Pope Benedict XVI. I see you shedding some tears already. You can dab them with your handkerchief. Quick on the heels of the completion of his doctoral studies in 1992, Father Godfrey joined the faculty of his alma mater, the Pontifical Urbaniana University, Rome, as lecturer in the Faculty of Philosophy. For 21 years, he taught undergraduate and graduate courses in philosophical anthropology, African philosophy, philosophy of religion, history of contemporary philosophy, scientific methodology, history of the cultures of the medieval Europe, etc., etc. Rising gradually to the rank of a full professor. He was appointed vice rector of the university in 2008, a position he held until his severance from the university in order to assume leadership of our own Nsukka diocese. Added to his professional role as a pontifical Urbaniana university, he taught in other Catholic universities and higher institutions in Italy. These include the Ateneo Regina Apostolorum in Rome, Pontifica Facoltà di Scienze dell'Educazione in Rome, and the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Milan. He has also taught African philosophy at the John Carroll University at the Vatican City program since its inception in the fall of 2005. Currently, Father Bishop is the Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of the Governing Council of the Enugu State University of Science and Technology. Most Reverend Professor Onah, an established authority in philosophical anthropology, has explored several dimensions of his discipline as well as its interface with the gospel message in his many peer-reviewed published works in reputable international journals and other media. He has also discussed these themes to critical acclaim at several international symposia and conferences of learned societies. He has, in fact, attended conferences as an individual speaker in all the continents of the world, including Oceania. His seminal works include Self-Transcendence and Human History in Wolfhard Pannenberg, Lamb, 1999. Logotherapy and the Philosophy of Man, Vatican City, 2000. Odozi Obodo, Ọchịchị maka ezi ọganiru ndị Igbo. That's Good Governance and Development Among the Igbo in Owerri, 2003. African Philosophy and the Hermeneutics of Culture, edited with OBJ Ogwejiofo in Munster, 2005. Intellectualism and the Development of a People, here at Nsukka in 2011, as well as chapters in over a score of books and journals. Mr. Chairman, sir, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before us stands a repository and raconteur of Igbo folklores and tales, which he deftly weaves into his sermons and lectures to illustrate his points. A gifted orator whose skills and facility with the spoken word is a continual delight to his hearers. A man who can hold any audience spellbound and riveted by the sheer magic of his words and the beauty of his delivery. A talented singer who can sing virtually any piece of music in any tongue to the listening delight of all. A writer whose penmanship is legendary, as friends and correspondents preserve his letters not only for the elegance and grace of their compositions, but also for the sheer visual pleasure of his calligraphy. I hereby call on His Lordship, Most Reverend Professor Godfrey Igwebike Onah, the Catholic Bishop of Nsukka, to present the 57th Founders Day lecture of this great University of Nigeria.
First plead with Onah to do me the favor of not exciting the most elementary of my sentiments. Therefore, to put the Oja in his bag. I heard the orator. The introduction lasted too long. Talk about the Bishop of Nsukka as a masquerade. And that already sets up a cultural problem. I am never tired of reminding people that there are no masquerades in Igbo land. That the temporary visible presence of realities believed to come from the spiritual world among the living has no equivalent in English language. Or Mong can't be translated into English. And part of our cultural problem and religious one as well is that Christians continue to treat Ma as if it were a masquerade. My dear friends, those who know me know that I'm allergic to protocol in situations like this. But permit me to say, at least, respectable chairman, UB of Onitsha. I was honored by a reference to one of my interviews, and you read me right. If I may start with that, Your Majesty, yes, objective knowledge is not possible when you are too close to object. Because to be a subject, you need to have an object in front of you. And the word object in German is Gegenstand. Das, was mir gegenüber steht. And that is what is standing in front of me. And that is why certain things, if you want to see them properly, you take a distance, provided the distance is not too far for you to recognize the object. Some of our problems is that we have become so immersed in the issues involved that we are unable to analyze them objectively and critically. My dear friends, permit me also to say, dear Pro-Chancellor of the university with whom I share the same headache, but I know yours is less than mine. Brothers and sisters in Christ, and again permit me to say, dear lions and lionesses, because to you I dedicate my reflection today. Yes, I had the privilege of choosing the topic for this discussion, but that was not easy. Because, again, as the Germans say, where the Wahl hat, there hat die Qual. If you have a choice, you have a problem. Because you can imagine women standing in front of their wardrobe, imagining which one they would wear today and which one, whether it would match this bag or this shoe. And if you didn't have many, you just pick what you have, put it on and walk away. Because, again, I've spent so many years, I just realized I had published about 4 articles in journals on the issue of human dignity. Because I had done that for a very long time, and because I always wanted an opportunity to reflect on that with this university community, when I got the opportunity, I thought of deepening my reflection on that issue with particular reference to a university community. And that is why I thank the Vice Chancellor, Professor Benjamin Ozumba, who made this possible. When I was leaving Urbaniana after my appointment as bishop, the cardinal in charge of our university expressed regret because he acknowledged they didn't know how long it would take before any other African came to my level in the university. But then he said, and we know also what you have meant to the students, the young minds in this university. But he added, but I am aware that one of the biggest and most important universities in Nigeria is in your diocese. Therefore, I hope that you will have the opportunity of continuing your apostolate of forming young minds in that university. Prof, I had always wanted to be more frequent than I actually am in this university. When I was made bishop, I thought I was very busy in Rome as professor. I didn't know I was actually on vacation. So I chose the title to restore the dignity of man. Why and how? A young, hungry and angry lion came back to his den one evening after roaming the whole day with nothing to show for it and began to roar. All these miming guys, where they call themselves lecturer being a professor, we carry man dignity through way. So man they look for them since, but man no fit find them. Me I don't know where them hide them or where them throw where. For me I don't look for them. For lecture hall, for library, for lab, everywhere. Still I no find them. Man they suffer since to restore this dignity. Yet, he no gree restore. Make una want these mean guys so make them cuckoo bring back person dignity. Make man no suffer again. If not, when I come out from this place, if any of them walk across my way, I go show them pepper. We may be amused by what we may consider the misplaced aggression or even the ranting of this young man. Of course, we know better, or at least so we think. We know the history of and the background to the motto of the university. We know that the founders of the University of Nigeria, whom we fondly remember and respectfully celebrate in these days, especially the legendary Zik, whose wife is here beside me, had clear ideas and high ideals when the university was established. And that it was these ideals and ideas that inspired the motto. We know that Zik fought with all his intellectual strength to establish an indigenous university in eastern Nigeria because of his firm conviction of the role of a university in the emancipation of the African. And I quote from Zik, the aim of education in Africa is to develop the youth of the continent and prepare them for service to the people. The university should produce a generation that would be reliable, useful, and intelligent in the rapidly changing life and circumstances of the African people. We equally know that it was against the background of the twin evils of slave trade and British imperialism that this university was established. We know that the initial push for the enactment of the University of Nigeria law by the then Eastern Region on 18th May 1955 came from a recommendation by the report on the economic rehabilitation of Eastern Nigeria published in the same year, part of which the chairman of the occasion, Obi of Onitsha, cited this morning. Many of us are familiar with a question which Zik himself both asked and answered thus. What are the ideals of the University of Nigeria? The simplest answer, he said, is that they are centered on its motto, to restore the dignity of man. And he explains, that is a restitution of man's inalienable birthright to social equality economic security, political freedom, and religious tolerance. And he continues, these abstract notions form the basis of man's fundamental rights, without which there would be neither regard nor respect for human dignity. And of course, we also know that the motto of this university is part of the alma mater pledge of the University of Nigeria, Nsukka: to seek the truth, to teach the truth, to preserve the truth, and thereby to restore the dignity of man. Commenting on the alma mater pledge, Professor B.I.C. Joma wrote, the education envisaged at the university must be such as would espouse the truth of self-realization. Self-realization in a colonial country where the African had lost his identity, where the African aped the white man in order to be accepted. Now, this was, at the time, the truth of the black man. It was an hour of need, he continues. There was the imminent independence without a national consciousness, without a national culture, without, in fact, an identifiable African or Nigerian personality. The University of Nigeria was established, emphasis mine, to seek the truth about our cultural identity, to explore our environment, and by studying our own past, expose to the outside world the truth of our existence. The university had the mandate to prepare its products to dare to be free, mentally, physically, morally, spiritually, politically, and economically and socially. End of quote. We know all that and much more. That is why we are amused in the apparent frustration of the young man, whom we think may have missed the whole point about restoring the dignity of man. But is the issue really as simple as that? Is the meaning of the motto to restore the dignity of man as self-evident as it seems? For Nnamdi Azikiwe, it means, as we have just said, a restitution of man's inalienable birthrights to social equality, economic security, political freedom, and religious tolerance. But why, one may ask, is man's birthright to the listed issues inalienable? What is the truth? The search of which is aimed at the restoration of human dignity. How exactly are we to understand the freedom that necessarily derives from our dignity as humans? Are we not taking too many things for granted already? In the first place, what exactly is meant by the dignity of man or human dignity? What is its ultimate source? Can it ever be lost? If yes, how? Can it ever be restored when lost? If yes, how? In the few, I hope not too many, minutes that will follow, I shall attempt to answer some of these questions. And I thank the chairman of the Senate ceremonials for his patience. You may get a text in front of you, but I thought I could do what I did for my 21-year teaching career, where I never had a lecture note. But he said, no, you must give us something that we will publish. And I wrote something and handed it over to him lately. And while he was producing, I kept writing. And if I wasn't here now, I would still be writing. Then let's examine the dignity of the human person. Why I'm saying this is that you don't get lost in the text, because I may not be there. In the 20th century, there was a remarkable upsurge in the consciousness of the dignity of the human person, as could be seen in the volume of literature devoted to the theme by scholars and institutions all over the world. This is not, however, to say to suggest that this consciousness was lacking in earlier periods. At least a tacit acknowledgement of the dignity of the person seems to form part of the axiological dimension in most human beings. Several ancient authors reflected this consciousness in what they wrote about man. For instance, the author of the book of Genesis, the author of Psalm 8, such Greek philosophers as Anaxagoras, Plato, Aristotle, and etc. In the Italian Renaissance, human dignity was so central a theme in the works of some authors as to constitute their title. It was, nevertheless, with a so-called anthropological turn in the modern period, and especially through the input of the existentialist and personalist philosophers in the 20th century, that the twin ideas of human dignity and human freedom became of interest, not just to some scholars, but to the ordinary members of the society as well. Furthermore, unlike what was the case in the earlier periods of history, dignity and freedom are, in contemporary mentality, perceived as belonging to the human person as such, to all human beings, and not just to some classes of human beings. The end of the Second World War, with the socio-political arrangement and organizations that emerged thereafter, especially the United Nations Organization, as well as the beginning of the struggle for independence by many states that had been under colonial rule, contributed considerably to the increase in the consciousness of the dignity of the human person among ordinary members of the society. Although human beings are largely aware of their dignity and even often try to assert it with force, not everybody can say exactly in what this dignity consists or from what it derives. To many, the meaning of the word dignity seems obvious, but let us consider the following uses of the word. Ikechukwu carries himself with dignity. That job is below your dignity. We must acknowledge the dignity of work or of labor. It can hardly be said that the word dignity is used in the three statements in exactly the same way. In the first, Ikechukwu carries himself with dignity. Dignity means a certain nobility of manner or bearing, which makes Ikechukwu worthy of respect. Look at Obi of Onitsha, the way he carries himself, then you will know what I mean by dignity in that first sense. In the second statement, that job is below your dignity. Dignity refers to a status. In the third, we must acknowledge the dignity of work. Dignity means worth, value, excellence. These three uses are slightly different, though closely related. All three senses are implied when the term dignity is applied to the human person. When we talk of the dignity of the human person, therefore, we mean his singular worth, his excellence, his ontological value and status, that for which he deserves unconditional respect as a person. By the dignity of the human being, we mean that absolute, unconditional inner worth or value of a human being, thanks to which he or she should always be treated as an end in himself and never as a means to some other end. To use a very famous expression of the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. The etymology does not explain everything about words. But when we examine the origin of some words, we have some idea. The word in English, dignity, came to English through French, dignité. And dignité came also from Latin dignitas, a derivative of dignus, worthy. Also from the same source, so that you will know the relationship between these. The Latin dignare, which is the source of the English rem, to dignify to have decorum, to be decent, all these terms stem from the same source. Although Kant himself did not define dignity, there is a distinction he made which sheds some light on the meaning of the term. He says, in the kingdom of ends, everything has either a price or a dignity. Whatever has a price can be replaced by something else as its equivalent. On the other hand, whatever is above all price and therefore admits of no equivalence has a dignity. The human being has a dignity in the sense that he is above all price, and one human being cannot be replaced by another human being. You can replace the Vice Chancellor of University of Nigeria, Nsukka, but Professor Benjamin Ozumba is irreplaceable. Because there is a particularity and peculiarity that brings into his being Professor Benjamin Ozumba that only himself can supply. Each human being is unique and deserves respect from himself and from others. Elsewhere, Kant writes, man as a person is exalted above all price. He is not to be valued merely as a means to the ends of other persons, or even to his own ends, but to be prized as an end in himself. This is to say, he possesses a dignity, and here he explains, an absolute inner worth, whereby he exacts the respect of all other rational beings in the world. A question immediately arises. How can the human being, as limited, fragile, and unstable as he is, possess an absolute, unconditional inner worth or value? Sure, a limited subject cannot be the source of its absolute worth. What then is the source of human dignity? The preamble of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights begins thus: whereas recognizing of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family, whereas recognizing that this is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world, and then it continues. But one member of its drafting committee is quoted as having said, we agree on these rights, but on the condition that no one asks us why. That the United Nations did not provide the philosophical grounds for this lapidary affirmation does not, however, mean that there are no grounds. It can be argued that the UN presumed that it was the business of theories of human nature to explain the source or sources of the inherent dignity and equal inalienable rights of all human beings. In fact, every theory of human nature stands or falls on the issue of the ultimate source of the dignity of the human person, which also explains the equality, the basic equality of all humans. It is the acid test that distinguishes valid theories from human nature from spurious ones. It has been observed earlier that there was a remarkable rise in the consciousness of the dignity of the human person in the last century. Nevertheless, many of the theories of human nature that have been advanced and defended in contemporary history of thought can hardly provide the basis for defending the unconditional inner worth and the equality of all human persons. One can group the many theories of human nature under two broad headings: the divine spark theories and the biological theories. To summarize, the divine spark theories are very old, and they are found among many ancient traditions, including the Igbos. The divine spark theorists maintain that what makes the human being distinct is that there is something in him that comes from the Creator, from the divine. And that thing in him makes him capable of knowing and relating with the divine. And that thing in him is present in every human being. And that is the source of the dignity and also of equality. The biological theories of human dignity, of human nature, on the other hand, would say that human beings, this is more recent, but they say that human beings are not products not of a creator, but they are products of a process of biological evolution. This, especially since the time of Darwin, has become very prevalent. Seen from the biological point of view, humans are not little gods, because Psalm 8 summarizes this by saying that human beings are a little lower than the angels, little lower than God. And the book of Genesis expresses the Judeo-Christian view of this in a way that is not repeated in any other tradition. That is calling the human being the image of God. But according to the biological theories of human nature, human beings are not a little lower than the angels, but only a little higher than the monkeys. The biblical tradition teaches us that man was created by God freely and out of love, and in his own image and likeness. The evolutionists, for their part, sustain that man was created by pure chance, out of necessity, and in the image and likeness of monkeys. Let it be said that the validity of these lines of thought does not ultimately depend on which of them makes the human being feel good about himself, but rather on how much any of them is capable of rationally and coherently explaining all the aspects of human nature and human actions, including the ultimate meaning of human life. I will take your permission, because of the context of this discussion, the university community, to tell you straight away, many theories of evolution are no theories at all. They are religious dogmas, especially the Darwinian theory of evolution. Scientists will teach me that a theory is always subject to verification and falsification. Where can you verify the evolutionary process that gave rise to the human being? Who was there to observe it in such a way that he would replicate it? And by the way, how can you talk of a progressive evolution when there is no end in view? How can you say that what comes after is not worse than what was before? Again, how can you say that from pure chance you can produce order? Look, the first law of probability tells us that the chances that the purely probable events or probable or chance events can give result to another, can affect another chance event is zero. So if there is zero probability that a chance event will influence another chance event in future, how can you talk of a theory of evolution? It is not without reason that that theory is defended by force. And in some universities and schools in the United States of America, if you doubt it at all, you lose your job. You know, scientists can be more obscurantists than even theologians, because many think that science is an objective knowledge and a practical knowledge. With all due reverence to the scientists here, there is too much politics in science. Because it's the politics that even decides which researches are published or acknowledged in the first place. Because Darwin corresponds with a period in which the European was looking for a scientific, in inverted commas, reason for dominating the rest of the world. And he provided it, just as philosophers before him had provided theoretical justification for subjugation. It is my opinion that whereas some of the biological theories, not necessarily the Darwinian version, provide useful insight into the material dimension of the human being, they are unable to account for the unconditional inner worth of the human being, every human being. This is because there is no place for the absolute in biological theories. There is no place for the unconditional in these theories. Within the biological theories of human nature, the dignity of the human being would depend on many variables, not just biological, but also social, political, and environmental. In that case, human dignity would be liable to the various forms of distortions and manipulations. When, however, human dignity is tied directly to the divine, as in the divine spark theories, its stability is guaranteed. Human dignity is better understood when viewed in the context of man's relationship with God, the perfect and absolute being. Different philosophical systems have described this in different ways. I'll give only one example of a very ancient one. The very first recorded theory of human nature that we find in Egyptian culture, Egyptian history or tradition about more than 2,000 years before Christ. According to this theory, the world, of course, was not created, but emerged through a process of self-evolution, yes. But the first principle to emerge in that process of evolution was an intelligent principle, the car. And once this car, the intelligent principle, emerged, it became responsible for the ordering of the rest of the emergence of the principles. And this principle, the car, is responsible also for the order in the universe. And it is present in every human being, which is why, according to the Egyptians, every human being is capable of understanding and respecting the order in the universe. The Egyptians had no moral code in form of a commandment. They just had the belief that every human being who had the principle of order and arrangement should be in a position to recognize that order and live according to it. And more importantly, that principle, the ka, was what returned to the divine after the human being's sojourn on earth. Then, as I said, the Ghanaians, all of them, Igbo people themselves, either in the theory of Mo or Chi, have also tried to show that there is something divine in the human being. There are differences in the interpretation given by the philosophers in the image of man in God, which is the clearest expression of this in history, as the one we find in Judeo-Christian tradition. Nevertheless, for most of the Christian philosophers, it is because the human being is made in God's image that is able to know God, to love him, know him and love other human beings, and exercise dominion over the rest of created order. The Latin expression for the image of God is imago Dei. And because the imago Dei is the source of man's ability to know God, imago Dei is also interpreted as capax Dei. The image of God in man is also the source of the basic equality of all human beings. Since every human being is created in the image of God and things equal to one thing are equal to one another, all human beings are equal. Although some people in theory or in practice deny the ontological equality of all human beings, or on the basis of gender, social status, race, or other social constructs, such a position cannot be defended once one accepts that the human being is made in the image of God. For that would mean that God created some persons more in his image than others. If it is admitted that creation in the image of God, is the same for all human beings, it then follows that there is something divine in every human being. We shall return to this later. Unwilling to derive man's dignity from his relationship with God, Kant, whom I referred to earlier, mistakenly grounded it on morality and man's capacity to give moral law to himself. That was to be the beginning of trouble for human dignity, with very grave consequences in social and political life. Uprooted from its firm metaphysical foundation in the divine being and planted in the quicksand of human moral autonomy, the ground was prepared for later relativistic interpretations of human dignity, which ultimately led to the theoretical justification of its outright denial in some human beings. And the situation worsened with Darwinism. Closely associated with the image of God in man is man's openness to God. Because since he's capable of relating with God, who is absolute, he remains eternally and unsatisfiably open to God. Only the absolute will satisfy the human being. Of course, he never experiences that satisfaction in this world. Another thing that is related to that is the idea of man's openness to his fellow human beings. The openness of man to the infinite and absolute being includes his openness to the finite beings surrounding him, which, precisely because they are finite, cannot be the final objects of his openness. Of course, we are familiar with the I-U relationship, the dialogical relationship that is best expressed in the man-woman relationship that is institutionalized in marriage. That is the context of man's realization of his image, because it is in the context of a you and a we that a human being can really say I. Man's social nature, therefore, derives first and foremost from his openness to the absolute. In its authentic form, it involves the communion between two or more persons who recognize the dignity and equality of each other. Severed from this metaphysical source of vital energy, human social life becomes mere aggregation of individuals without communion, and may even degenerate into dominion and conflict. What about freedom and responsibility? One of the most fundamental expressions of human dignity is freedom. Freedom is a complicated idea, but everybody believes that he or she is free. To deny it theoretically would lead to practical absurdity. I sometimes ask my students whether they believe the human being is free. An argument ensues between them, and always some say yes and others say no. At the end, those who say no will end this way. Well, you are free to hold your opinion, and I'm free to hold mine. I said, there you have. Some freedom is always left to the individual human being. And very often we see freedom as freedom from constraints, immunitas a coactione. But there is also the freedom for, that is the freedom to do something. Freedom from could be only negative, but freedom for is very positive and usually unlimited. It is the freedom for value. It is the freedom for a good. It is the freedom for an alternative. Seen in this way, the horizon is widened for the exercise of human freedom. An important aspect of human freedom is its relationship with the truth. Jesus tells us in John chapter 8, verse 23, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. To be free in a way befitting of his nature, man has to remain open to the truth, to seek the truth, and to embrace it when he has found it. For one reason, openness to the truth is ultimately openness to God, since every particular truth is but a pointer to the absolute truth, God himself. The moral obligation to seek the truth should therefore be understood as the obligation to remain consciously open to God, who is the whole truth. Furthermore, freedom cannot be divorced from knowledge of oneself and of reality. Knowledge about oneself and about reality informs one the elements necessary for making one's choice an informed choice. Ignorance is an obstacle to the freedom of choice, in that one cannot choose what one does not know, or what one does not know well enough. Choice has much to do with the perceived value of things. It is therefore important that the truth about the objects of choice be known. Freedom divorced from the truth degenerates into arbitrariness. If a person shuts himself off from the truth, he deprives his conscience, the seat of moral judgment, of its source of life, and it soon atrophies and dies. The task of constantly seeking the truth can be daunting in some fields and sometimes even discouraging. One 18th century Ethiopian philosopher, Zera Yacob, said that people readily accept the opinions of others as truth because they are too lazy to investigate themselves. But as daunting as this may be, thanks to his social nature, man does not have to search alone. He is helped by his fellow human beings who constantly share with him the positive results of their own search. Orgasm. Besides, earlier results are also preserved and handed down through the ages through various means. So this makes the search for truth social, communitarian, and always ongoing. Another side of freedom is responsibility. An informed choice is a responsible choice. In opting for one alternative instead of another, I take a position with regard to those alternatives. It is as if both alternatives we are soliciting response from me, and they want me to take a decision. And whenever I take a decision, I become responsible for my decision. There is a relationship between responsibility and responsibility. There is no escaping from the moral implication of this choice. Joy within me, probably praise from others if the choice is perceived as right or wrong, or a right one, and sorrow or guilt within me, and probably blame from others if the choice is perceived as wrong. Thus, my freedom to choose makes me at the same time responsible for my choice. Freedom and responsibility are like two sides of a coin. You can't have one without the other. This is clearly manifested in the commission God gave to the human being to administer the rest of the created universe. Having been created in God's image and in his likeness, he is made responsible for God's creation. But I ask, can this dignity rooted in God be lost? to restore the dignity of man. If human dignity is the unconditional, absolute worth or value of the human being, which derives from his nature as imago Dei, the image of God, can it ever be lost without the human being ceasing to be human? If yes, what would a human being who has lost his dignity become? A beast? And if it cannot be lost, why talk of its restoration? It is common knowledge that a quality, power, capability, or faculty of a living thing that is not properly used gets weakened and may even be lost. Those of you familiar with Lamarckism will know that Jean-Baptiste Lamarck used this theory in his own theory of evolution, saying that some rats, some rodents that lived in holes all their lives lost their power of sight. The organ of sight was there, but it was no longer used for sight. But this was not, and then he said that when such modification is perfected in the two sexes, it would over time be transmitted to the offspring. Well, any power, capacity, or ability not used is weakened or even lost. This has led to a prolonged debate among Christian thinkers on the effect of the misuse of freedom on the image of God in man. In moral religious terms, the misuse of freedom is called sin. There has been a long debate on the impact or influence of sin, consequences of sin on the image of God in man. It is a very long debate, beginning from the 2nd century of Christianity. Whereas some say that with the sin of Adam and Eve, the image of God in man was lost completely and was only restored by Jesus Christ. Others say that the image of God in man was hurt by sin, but not completely lost. This was the position of Augustine and later of St. Thomas Aquinas. And why I accept this theory as convincing is that it is only when we admit that some minimum of the image of God remains in man, even if it is disfigured. That is the only basis for presuming that the human being, no matter how low he has fallen, can still be converted and initiate another relationship with God. If the image of God in man was completely lost, it would not have been possible for Christ to redeem man, because man would not even understand the language that Christ was speaking. And this minimum of the image of God that comes from creation, that is the thing that remains always, and that is the basis of the human dignity and equality we are talking about. It exists in saints and it exists in sinners. It exists in the rational thinker as well as in the lunatic. Every human being is and remains an image of God. Having said this, it ought to be added that the human being himself, with all his qualities and gifts, is a project. He is dynamic. Not even the image of God in man is static. This means that just as the image of man can be disfigured without being completely lost, it can also be enhanced and improved upon until it becomes perfect. Those in whom the image of God has become perfect are called the saints. If we admit some development or progression in the image of man, God in man, it then follows that it can be more developed in some persons and less in others. Or even that the same person can at one time be more in the image of God and at another time less so. To express it in the lines of the distinctions made by Thomas Aquinas, we would have to accept that the saints are more in the image of God than the rest of us who are still struggling. And in this case, what guarantee do we still have for the unconditional character or the dignity of the human person that is ultimately founded on the image of God in man? It is founded on that fact of having originally been created in God's image. With regard to the progressive actualization of the image of God through virtuous or good life, it seems logical to think that the more a human being participates in the divine life, in the life of the divine being, the more the divine image in him shines forth, and the nearer he is to perfection. Nevertheless, only God himself can evaluate the more and the less in this case, because the actualization of the knowledge and love of God in the life of an individual takes place at a level where no other human being has access in the individual conscience. That minimum of imago Dei, which remains even in the supposedly most perverse of human beings, is still enough to guarantee his dignity as image of God. Hence, he still retains his capacity to relate with God and to respond to God's grace. After what has been said so far concerning the image of God, in which man is ultimately, in image of God in man, which is the ultimate foundation of human dignity, we can now return to the question: can human dignity be lost? My answer is no. Not completely. So long as man remains an image of God, he still has some dignity. Otherwise, all the talk about the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family would be empty and meaningless. Human rights cannot be said to be inalienable if the dignity from which they derive would be completely lost. Nevertheless, to the extent that the image of God in man can be disfigured or diminished, to that same extent, human dignity, which derives therefrom, can also be diminished. Whatever disfigures or diminishes the image of God in man, diminishes human dignity. And sure, human dignity can be so diminished in a person or a group of persons as to be thought to be completely lost, even though it is not. Furthermore, the verb to restore has at least two meanings. It may mean to bring back to the or to re-establish what was removed, restitution, or to repair, refurbish, or rehabilitate what was damaged or is worn out. There is a difference between restitution and rehabilitation. In the first sense, human dignity cannot be restored since it is never lost or taken away completely. In the second sense, however, human dignity can and ought always to be restored, since it is often damaged and hurt by human beings themselves. Human action and inaction are capable of lowering or hurting human dignity in oneself and in others. Given that freedom is the foremost expression of the imago Dei, the image of God, and the misuse of freedom or sin disfigures it, it then follows that the misuse of human freedom or sin lowers human dignity. Whereas evil actions against a person are capable of hurting or lowering his dignity, it is a person's own evil actions that have more direct negative effect on his dignity. In other words, what a person does or fails to do is more detrimental to his dignity than what others do to him or her. When it comes to the promotion and enhancement of human dignity, therefore, the role of the individual subject in collaboration with God is primary. Nevertheless, given the social dimension of the human being, other persons and institutions also play vital roles in promoting the dignity and promoting and recognizing the dignity, and by providing an enabling environment for the individual's progressive actualization of the image of God in him, especially through education. And this brings me to university education and the promotion of human dignity. Education in general, and university education in particular, helps man actualize his full potentials as the image of God, for it exposes him to the many dimensions of the truth about God, about man, and about the world. Such exposure enhances human freedom and thus promotes human dignity. The greatest freedom you can give to a man is to educate him. Bishop Michael Eneje never tired of telling us, and he educated us. People often see the university as a place where young persons acquire more knowledge and better skills that will prepare them for specific tasks in the society of adults. And they are right. But according to the 19th century English philosopher and man of letters, John Cardinal Henry Newman, a university does much more than that. For him, university training, and I quote, aims at raising the intellectual tone of society, at cultivating the public mind, at purifying the national taste, at supplying true principles to popular enthusiasm and fixed aims to popular aspiration, at giving enlargement and sobriety to the ideas of the age, at facilitating the exercise of political power, and refining the intercourse of private life. It is the education, university education, which gives a man a clear, conscious view of his own opinions and judgments, a truth in developing them, an eloquence in expressing them, and a force in arguing them. And for Newman, the end product of this type of training of university education is a gentleman. This noble view of the university and university education has its ancient roots in what many regarded as the source of modern universities in Plato's Academy, founded around 386 BC in Athens. Let me spare you the history of the university and mention simply that Plato was a politician. He joined one political party, and he found the political party wanting. He changed party, joined another, and the one he thought was the best killed his master Socrates, and he gave up. He gave up on politics. But he did not retire. He used the little money he got from some of his academic activities and built an academy in a piece of land that had been given to him by a friend. And he said, here, I would prepare minds that would be capable of turning the political destiny of Athens. Rather than just lament bad governance in Athens, he established the first ever university in Western history. I say Western because the Egyptian priests had places of training of young men near the massive temples where they dedicated themselves to the formation of young minds. And this was the place where mathematics and philosophy and astronomy were all born. But Plato's academy was destroyed by a dictator, an emperor. An emperor who, like all dictators, found education a threat. My dear, I'll return to this. Bad governments are the worst enemies of universities. And this was destroyed by a tyrant, Emperor Justinian, in 529 AD, after more than 100 years, or nearly 800 years. And an anti-Christian historian like Bertrand Russell saw that as a guilt that he could place on the conscience of the entire Christian church, calling Christianity the source and the origin of Middle Ages and darkness in human mind in Europe. Sorry, with all due respect to Russell and his likes, he was ignorant of his own history, because he had forgotten that the revival of the universities came from the monasteries and the Catholic Church. Of course, that time, churches founded schools and universities, and before you could teach there, you would get the authority of the Pope or his vicar, the bishop. And that is where you have all the licentia, docendi, masters, and many of the terms you have now, like chancellor, pro-chancellor, vice-chancellor, chair. They are all ecclesiastical terms because the university originated in the womb of the church. And for your information, when teachers needed to obtain the permission of the Pope to teach and to issue licenses, there was no need to add the adjective Catholic to a university because Protestantism was not yet born. That was 300 years before the birth of Luther and more than 500 years before the birth of Henry VIII. So you know that the church, the Christian church, has done more to the promotion of university education than any other institution. And this will interest you or remind you of what you already know. Igbo people think that the word university comes from sheets, knowledge of universals or universal knowledge. I'm sorry to disappoint them, but the word universitas comes from the Latin word for guild, association, something like a trade union. The first Universitas Scholarium was formed in Bologna in the 12th century. And then it became Universitas Scholarium et Magistrorum. That is the guild of scholars and teachers. And why did they found these guilds? To protect themselves against people who would hinder their pursuit and search for truth. Now, foremost in the minds of these people who formed these guilds, universitas, was the unhindered pursuit of truth. Modern universities, therefore, owe their origins to the desire within the church to cultivate in a group of people the search for truth as a profession. The search for truth as a profession. Truth about God, about man, and about the world. Our university should never, therefore, relent in its pursuit of truth about the physical nature. Proper knowledge of the forces of nature and their impact on human life will help man to fulfill his God-given role of mastery and proper administration of the universe. This will also liberate man from debilitating fears of the forces of nature. Nigeria is one country where professors of natural and human sciences turn to Dibias in Enugu Ezike and Babalawos for charms to control the forces of nature or to resolve some riddles in their lives rather than challenging their intellectual capacities for solutions to these problems. How many deans and heads of departments enter the office in the morning and see a pot with feathers and with egg and with a lizard? I'm the bishop, so I know. So, because, you see, and I tell people, if the white man had the knowledge of how to so control the atmosphere as to make it rain when he wanted and to stop raining when he wanted, we would have professors of rainmaking sitting in this hall. When debilitating sickness and abject poverty hurt the dignity of man, when the university seeks and finds solutions to these dehumanizing conditions, it helps in restoring human dignity to its splendor. When the first guild of teachers and students, Universitas Magistrorum et Scholarium, was formed in Paris, it was meant to guarantee unhindered pursuit of truth. Is it not a tragic irony that today in Nigeria, the universitas, the guild of teachers and scholars, sometimes positively hinders the pursuit of truth? Dictators, as I said, dictators and bad governments are about the worst enemies of the truth that the university seeks and teaches. And they will do everything to disturb the normal activities of the university. Anytime, therefore, if you take away nothing from this lecture, take this. Anytime, therefore, that the university interrupts its normal program in protest against the government, the university, by that very act, makes itself an ally of its oppressor. Put simply, all strike actions that interrupt the normal search for and the teaching of truth in the university hurt the university more than they hurt the government. Bad governance harms human dignity, and those who have pledged to promote that dignity should resist the temptation of being hired as mercenaries in the enemy's army. While examining the meaning of human dignity, we saw that Kant held that since the human person has dignity and not a price, he should never be used merely as a means to other person's end. To use a person as a means to an end is to deny his dignity and thus to dehumanize him. This is particularly important in the teacher-student relationship. Yes, a laborer deserves his wages, but the students are not simply the means of livelihood for the professors and lecturers. Otherwise, the teacher may earn a lot of money, but still run the risk of experiencing inner emptiness or existential vacuum, to use the expression of Viktor Frankl, when he talks about one having the means of living, but no meaning to live for. The German language uses the same word for education and culture, Bildung. This is because education not only cultivates the human spirit an educated person is a cultured person. But it also produces culture. The university is therefore a cultural laboratory and workshop. About laboratory. There was a debate in the university about the pronunciation. In London, of course, in England. In England, not in London, somewhere in England. And this debate raged about whether it was laboratory or laboratory. Or laboratory. Where did the emphasis fall? And then a professor of phonetics was invited to open a laboratory or laboratory or laboratory. And all the professors of English were watching to see what he would say to score a point for themselves. He took the scissors and said, I feel privileged to have been invited to open this magnificent lab. So, the university is a cultural lab and workshop. It is where man constantly interrogates his culture by critically examining its values. In that way, culture is kept alive and healthy through the periodic excretion of toxic values and disvalues, and a constant inflow of purified values. This is the only way the university can do what Newman calls raising the intellectual tone of society. Many of the cultural practices to which we tenaciously cling today are outdated answers which our forefathers proposed to the problems of their times. Some of them are even harmful to human dignity, like the Ohu and the Osu caste systems in Igbo land. Our forefathers would definitely be angry with us for continuing with some of their practices, although our own times and challenges are different from theirs. And in many areas, we know better than they did. It is part of the function of the university to wean contemporary Nigerians from their childish attachment to those cultural practices that tarnish the image of God in man and diminish his dignity. There ought to be a remarkable difference between the culture of a community of hunters and gatherers and the community of a university town. It seems obvious, so obvious, that it may not be worth mentioning here, that if students in the university are little gods or lesser gods, not higher apes, then where they are kept and trained should reflect their dignity and not resemble a zoo or a piggery. Besides, biologists here, biologists among you, will teach me that from the purely biological point of view, among all living beings, human beings contribute the least to the environment. In fact, one biologist told me that if one day human beings would be extinct from the face of the earth, the other living beings would celebrate. Because we contribute least, and yet we consume the most. But thanks to their knowledge of truth about the world, humans can do a lot to beautify the environment and can even influence the ecosystem in a positive way by improving on the interaction between the other organisms in their physical environment. And here, the prof is not there, the VC, because I wanted to acknowledge with gratitude the wonderful work he is doing in improving the environment. Not only the quality of learning is improving in UNN, also the quality of the environment is improving. I take my walk around the campus of Nsukka, and every time I walk, something new appears in the horizon. So we congratulate Professor Ozum. And I'm already at my conclusion. Truth. This is the link between the university and human dignity. To seek the truth, to embrace the truth, to teach the truth, to preserve the truth, and thereby to restore the dignity of man. As simple as this alma mater pledge of the University of Nigeria Nsukka may appear, these 4 lines, to which I have added a 5th, to embrace the truth, in reality express a profound religious commitment and project. That the truth is always written in capital T in the pledge should not be dismissed merely as a matter of style. In B.I.C. Joma's commentary, to which I referred in the introduction of this essay, he suggests that the truth meant in the pledge was the truth of the self-realization of the Nigerian personality. Within the context of the Nigerian independence, which coincided with the establishment of the university, one may say that Professor Ijoma gave a correct interpretation of the intention of the founding fathers of the university. But an institution like a university is much more than its origins. Perhaps not even the founding fathers saw the need to link the dignity of man, which was central to their project, directly with its ultimate source, the truth, God himself. But unless this is done, truth becomes relative and human dignity remains subject to individual whims and caprices. Every truth about the self-realization of the Nigerian personality points beyond itself to that truth which is the foundation of our being. To restore the dignity of man entails, therefore, leading man to know who he really is, the image of God, and helping him to make that image shine brightly for everyone to see. If education does not do this, if it does not lead the human being to the fullest realization of his potentials, education comes from the Latin ex ducere, to lead out. If it doesn't do this, beginning with the potentials of self-knowledge and self-determination, freedom, then education becomes mere indoctrination. According to the teachings of Zarathustra in the ancient Persian religion, to cultivate the earth in order to make it bear fruit is to do a holy thing, to do something which associates one closely with the divine. The same idea is expressed in the 2nd chapter of the book of Genesis. If this is so, then he who cultivates the human spirit to make it bear fruit, to make it more the image of God which it was created to be, does even a more sacred thing. To educate is to participate in God's work of creation of the human being. This is why the prophet Daniel says that those who have educated others will shine like bright stars in eternity. I know that every teacher and professor knows Daniel 12:3. More than 25 years ago, I wrote the following lines. To know himself, a man must know his God. And to know his God, a man must know himself. As the image of God, man needs to know God, to know who this God is, whose image he is. And if he knows himself well enough, he would be able to recognize the dimension in him which points back to God. The moral imperative on the Christian to share the knowledge of God, which he obtained through the revelation of Jesus Christ, is to be understood in this sense. It is not enough for man to know God, for man to know that he is the image of God, not just the senior brother of a chimpanzee. It is equally important that he knows that he is the image of a God who is love, and that therefore he is called to love God and his neighbor. It is also important for him to know that he is God's representative as his image on earth, and he has been given the responsibility of managing this universe. It is important for him to know that his worth as a person, his dignity, is not conferred on him by any human being or any human institution, but by this God who loves him so much as to desire only his happiness in this world and in the next. All that other human beings and institutions can and should do is to recognize his dignity and help him in promoting it. Whether man knows it or not, this is true, but it makes it that he knows it. I guess I leave you with this story. I guess many of you in this audience are familiar with this story told by Anthony de Mello. That is why it is important to man that he knows he is the image of God who is love. A man, says Anthony de Mello, found an eagle's egg and put it in a nest of a barnyard hen. The eaglet hatched with a brood of chicks and grew up with them. All his life, the eagle did what the barnyard chicks did, thinking he was a barnyard chicken. He scratched the earth for worms and insects. He clucked and cackled, and he would thrash his wings and fly a few feet into the air. Years passed, and the eagle grew very old. One day, he saw a magnificent bird above him in the cloudless sky. It glided in graceful majesty among the powerful wind currents, with scarcely a bit of its strong golden wings. The old eagle looked up in awe. "Who's that?" he asked. "Oh, that's the eagle, the king of birds," said his neighbor. "He belongs to the sky. We belong to the earth. We are chickens." So the eagle lived and died a chicken, for that was what he thought he was. My last word is for you, my dear lion, or maybe lioness, the angry lion or lioness in my opening story. Bros, make nobody confuse you. Your dignity day can't be. And he day with you. Even self say, you know they shine well now. Nobody fit carry and throw away from you throw away. Even teacher self, I've been a lecturer being them. You know if he do that too. If he try harass your dignity, now him own dignity in the raw potty. You self fit help teacher shine him own dignity by showing him say him better pass Professor John Bull. Make you no lose hope, sha. Your dignity now God give him. Now God give him to you. Nobody go fit take him away from you. Just shine your eye, fine. They look for truth everywhere. Anytime you find one small truth, pocket and well, and your dignity go shine. Thank you.
At least I was right in my own introduction in two aspects. One, I steered clear of the subject, knowing very well that our lecturer was more than equal to, and I think he has proven